Okay, I'm back. I had a couple of thoughts on this Game versus Kendrick thing happening. Now, again, this is another one that's been brewing for a really, really long time. And I saw it happening and not everybody was picking up on it. So shout out to Stat. I think it was over there on the Third Verse podcast for getting some exclusives from Game, because I think a lot of people that have been watching it, we've been seeing this for a long time. This Game been kind of feeling some way about Kendrick for a while. And I think it's interesting that people didn't put a lot of these pieces together, because I think even if you look at a lot of G and X, Kendrick is letting you know exactly how you feel about a lot of that, even down to nigga feel entitled since he knew me since a kid. Bitch, I cut my granny off. She don't see it how I see it. Or to, what do you say? Since people are pandering to pick a side, let me do it for you. Fuck yo hip hop. Like, all that. There's a lot of lines that I think if you go back and you listen to them now, it's like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Even, put his head on a Cuban link as a monument. If you go back, Game got a lot of bars about Cuban links. So I think this whole thing is really interesting because there's a lot of questions that I think really comes out of it. Which one of them is, what is a big homie, right? Because I think a lot of times, okay, let's go like this. Let's take it back to where I believe the animosity started at. I think a lot of it started from, I think a lot of it was really, or more publicly seen. I think let's go back to the Super Bowl, not G and X Super Bowl. Let's go back to the West Coast Super Bowl where we had Snoop, Dre, Kendrick, and Eminem and 50. Right. And I think if you go back and you look at a lot of what Game was saying around, and it was kind of, rightfully so or unrightfully so, he wasn't feeling so cool about being left out in terms of like representation for the West. I think it's interesting because a lot of these guys, they give a lot of political answers, and I feel like Game has always been very vocal about expressing himself. But I notice I think a lot of the political answers happen based on how big the other artist is. Because people know they not just giving their opinion about the artist. They basically got to fight their fan base. They got to fight the success that artist has versus the success that they had. Remember when I came on, like if you scroll down to my first little talking head video or whatever, I was saying this exact same thing when I was like, Cole don't really fuck with Kendrick and Kendrick not really fucking with Cole like that. And everybody's like, well, what? I'm like, he just can't come out and say it because then you get hit with this whole hater thing, right? And so I think that this is the same thing with the Game thing. I think he's been fighting these hater allegations, man, but it's in you, bro. Like it's there, and I think so much of it has to do with he saw Kendrick before he became the Kendrick, and I took him on tour with me, yada yada yada, all of this shit. And it's like, I think not only is it a different time, nobody ever goes in and dissects what really happened, because I think a lot of times artists will take, some artists that are hot, they have a buzz, they about to blow, and take them on tour with them. But it's like, you ain't give niggas a deal. You ain't, help them position their album. And I'm not saying there's nothing to take somebody on tour. I'm just saying, I don't know if Game is actually Kendrick's big homie. And I don't know that Kendrick sees or ever saw Game as a big homie. I think he thought, yo, this dude is putting on for the West and, he's dope and he really be rapping, whoop-de-woo. But I don't know if he ever put him in that big homie position as much as Game is like, yo, I'm his elder. I'm his big homie, because I think a big part of being a big homie has to do with not opportunities, but actual guidance, and it seemed like that Kendrick got guidance from very specific people, but it never felt like Game was one of the dudes that helped shape and mold him and like, yo, do this, don't do that, right? So I think it's interesting if we just follow these little breadcrumbs that's been happening a lot that no one's been speaking of, and a lot of these political answers about game. And like, let me just say what I think. My specific opinion on a big part of this is I think that street rappers always got a little friction with the really lyrical rappers who wasn't outside like that. No matter what it is, there's a little like, you know. And so I think a lot of times when they ask Game about Kendrick, there's always a separation. Like, okay, they both from Compton or Bompton, but there always felt like Game was making a separation. Like, that's my little homie that got successful, but I'm the West Coast. Like, I'm affiliated. You know what I mean? It always felt like it always felt like to me that Game was like, yo, you can't compare me to him because I was really outside. I was really in beefs. And Stat said some of this to where like I went up against this person and that person. And I did this. Like I did it gangster West Coast rap music, you know? So I think he already feels like that puts him in a very elite class of MC. And then he's always basically said, if we go on bar for bar, I'm always going to choose myself. And we never going to be mad at somebody choosing himself over somebody else in a skills conversation, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff that led up to where we're about to get to, because I see it as Game is going to attempt to go nuclear, because I think he's kind of getting frustrated, and now it's no point in being political anymore now that Top Dog is called in and said, yo, this is the reason Kendrick really stopped messing with Game. He brought Drake to the city, shot a video, and he's dissing me in the video in my neighborhood or in my section, you know, my section of Los Angeles, or Compton rather. And I think Game knew that. You know, I think all this political stuff that like Wack, his manager or former manager, whatever, say like, oh, you know, because they're saying Game didn't know that it was smoke like that with Drake and Kendrick. And we got to call super cap on that. I think a big part of that too is for Game, beef is in his mind like what he had with G-Unit, what he had with, you know, this one and that one. So he like, I ain't, but to say that you didn't know that them two wasn't seeing eye to eye, and that bringing Drake to Compton was a clear sign of big homie, little homie treason, that's just dishonest, you know? And I think if you listen to Game, he been talking about it, but he just haven't been flat out saying like, yo, this is what it is. I think he been holding on to this hurt of my little homie blew up, and now I can't even, you know, get a text back from him, you know? And I think that's why if you look at the most recent verses, why does Game come out and before he performs the 100 song be like, you know, shout out to Drizzy, I don't care who don't like it? Who we talking about? Just put a name on a bullet. Say who you are envisioning when you say that. Don't make it seem like you just talking to, you know, the area or this. It's like you're talking to the guy who just 2 years ago went head to head with this dude and told him next time he hit the 10 freeway, I'm gonna need receipts, huh? So it's interesting when these guys get into doing that the political thing, you know. It's like, shout out to YG. YG drew a line in the sand and he got shouted out by Drake. You know who really banged a set? My nigga YG. And YG's like, yo, don't put my name in that. Now, Game didn't say, I fucks with Drake, I'm staying out of the battle, don't put my name in it. You know, people are choosing sides, and that's why Kendrick said, since they pandering to choose a side, let me do it for you. Fuck your hip hop. I watched the party just die. Like, you know, I think it's the same thing that happened, you know, when I was saying like, yo, it's a J. Cole Kendrick thing. People are like, what you talking about? J. Cole always talk. I think maybe one of the biggest signs, and I think people don't see this in hip hop, one of the biggest signs that two people are about to beef and they have friction is one person out of the group always talking about they love the other person. I remember when Remy Ma, right before her and Nicki Minaj got into it. I think it was Remy or Nicki. One of them was talking about just loving the other one or really fucking with the other one. I think it might have been Nicki. Can't wait for her to come home. Whatever, you know. But it always happened like that. It's always like a little bit of a one-sided public thing. And so was why I always knew that there was something between Game and Kendrick after that 100 video, because they always ask Game about Kendrick, and Game always say, I love him, I ride with him, whatever he was saying. And people never really was asking after that moment. People wasn't in interviews. They weren't asking Kendrick about Game, or when Kendrick recently got the Grammys or whatever hundreds of awards he got. He was shouting out G Malone. He was shouting out a lot of people from the West Coast, and he didn't say Game. And Game is a staple of the West Coast. Like, he is one of those premier names that if you go on Snoop, Dre, and naming all these, you know, people, you gonna put Game in there. He ain't say Game. So I think that's like really, really, I don't know, it's really interesting. And I think it wasn't until Stat did the interview and said, oh, Game feel like Kendrick been dissing him. He feel like he even dissed him, and he dissed him in Not Like Us. That like now it's the chatter. And I'm like, yes, the Game has been feeling like this for a really, really, really long time. And so it brings to mind the question for me sometimes I think about is like, I look at how people treat winners, you know, and it's kind of interesting that I feel like I said, when it was the whole Cole and Kendrick thing, I said like Cole took the diss down, not because my POV, not because he don't feel like how he feel and he don't want to stand on it. I think he took it down because he's like, I can't compete with the stardom and the moment that this guy is having, right? He's the more, in some sense, bigger, popular artist, you know? And I think it's the same thing. I think for a while, Game has chose not to speak on it, not to say things, keep it political, partially because of the magnitude of who Kendrick is. And it's like, you don't want to look like the guy from the same town that's not fucking with the guy, you know? But now I think him just getting, like, think about this. They from Compton. They have maybe mutual acquaintances in common. Let's just say we believe what Game is saying to be true. That 100 video was like 10 something years ago, 10 plus years ago. You never heard that Kendrick wasn't feeling that and that he stopped messing with you because of that. If we are to believe that's true, then what that tells us is they never been fucking with each other. You know, like, that's what it tells you, that the relationship is really, really fractured because it's been that long ago and nobody even tapped you on your shoulder like, he wasn't feeling that. Like, you can't, I mean, I guess that's to what the Game is saying. You know, when he talks about his love for Drake, he's always saying like, anything I need, Drake, pick up the phone. Anytime I this. And whenever he would say that, I'm like, there's always like a little ... after he say it. It's like, but who are you comparing that to? Why every time somebody bring up Drake, you don't say, oh, he's a dope MC. It's always like, oh, if I need tickets to a concert, my kids want to go, he pick up the phone. And I always felt like, compared to who? And it's like, we know who he's comparing that to. I can't get Kendrick on the phone. If my kids wanted to go to his concert, I'd probably have to buy tickets. You know what I mean? I think he's basically kind of saying like, this guy, Drake, who is the biggest whatever he is and has been, will pick up the phone for me. And then we got a guy who is also in his own right as large and big. And I know him personally, used to see him as a kid, can't get a text back. You know, so it's interesting, man, how they treat you when you're a winner. People, you see that with like all large. I think there are way more people that have issues with certain people, but if they're bigger, they kind of just, they don't feel there are very few people who just like will really actually go at the top, you know. And I think just Game and Kendrick both being from Compton makes it even more of a delicate situation, because I know that you're not trying to have people choosing sides. But I think one thing that is important to note and be very clear about, that Kendrick definitely seems like he's in his choosing sides era. Like, for sure. Like, he's not playing around. It's not, I don't mess with this person, but you see me taking a picture with him. Like, if you listen to the music, he's very serious about, this is our side over here. This is how we're moving. This is where I'm trying to take the culture. This is where I'm moving hip hop to. And if you not with that, you on the other side. So I think there's no middle ground for him when it comes to people deciding to rock with Drake. You know, a bitch nigga love bitch nigga. They exist together in style. Like, we just go. The other thing is we don't have to do a whole bunch of speculating and looking at too many breadcrumbs, because at the end of the day, we could just listen to the music. And I think the past 2 years, Kendrick's been telling you exactly what his agenda is and how he's carrying it, you know, down to whacked out murals. You know, it's like, he said what he said about Snoop. It was only right for me to let it go. He ain't mentioned Game by name. And you ain't seen him with Snoop since that, you know, like, very, very clear. And it's like, it's Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg is the quintessential, like, when you look up rapper in a dictionary, it's going to be Snoop face. Like, he's synonymous with rap and hip hop, biggest rapper by name of the world. He can't get in touch with Kendrick. He can't get in touch with Kendrick. He can't. And you ain't heard him say, yeah, I talked to Kendrick and this is what he meant by that line. You got Snoop saying, you know, I know what he meant. You know what I mean? This is saying, like, everybody's kind of like, nobody wants the wrath of Kendrick. But stay on topic here. My prediction is that, as Kendrick said, I put his head on a Cuban as a monument. I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to get a Game versus Kendrick. I don't think it's going to be like the Drake thing at all, but I think we're going to get more direct shots. I think Game is going to jump first, though. Game is, because he's emotional, he's impulsive, so he's going to jump. I give him maybe another, let's just say both of them. Before the year's end, we're going to come back to this video, because both of them are going to go. And it ain't going to go the way one of them think it's going to go. That's all I'm going to say about that. Listen, thank y'all for tuning in, for rocking with me. Just a couple thoughts about that. We see what happened. I got a bunch more videos coming. I'm getting in the routine of this thing. We're about to start cranking them out. So I appreciate everybody that's, still here.